we will introduce the 21 CLD Skilled Communication Rubric and Decision Tree. These capture the big ideas of skilled communication, and they are a useful framework when designing learning activities to develop students' communication skills. This lesson examines whether students are asked to produce extended or multimodal communication, and whether the communication must be substantiated with a logical explanation, examples, or evidence that supports a central thesis. At higher levels of the rubric, students must craft their communication for a particular audience. The 21 CLD Skilled Communication Rubric examines whether students are required to communicate their own ideas regarding a concept or issue. In addition, it examines if that communication is supported with evidence and if it is designed with a particular audience in mind. We can capture the key ideas about skilled communication by using a decision tree. A decision tree is a visual way of representing the big ideas in skilled communication. It is designed around a number of questions. As you can see, there are 3 questions in the skilled communication decision tree. The first relates to whether the communication is extended or multimodal. The second relates to providing supporting evidence. The third, to designing communication for a particular audience. Considering each of these questions is useful when designing a learning activity. The power of using a decision tree is that it provides a framework for designing learning activities, and in this case, examining opportunities for skilled communication. For example, there will be times when you will need students to engage in extended and/or multimodal communication. At times, you will want your students to provide supporting evidence to explain their ideas or support their thesis with facts and examples. There are other times when you will want students to design products to communicate to a particular audience. It all depends on the planned learning outcomes and the needs of your students. Not all learning activities will have each of the levels, but over the period of a year, for example, you could look to include learning activities at all of the levels. You need to bear in mind as you look at the decision tree that the numbering system is a code, not a score. For example, a code 1 merely indicates that students are not required to produce extended or multimodal communication. It is not a value judgment about the quality of the learning activity. We can capture all of these ideas by using a decision tree. A decision tree is a visual way of representing the big ideas in skilled communication. It is designed as a number of questions. As you can see, there are 3 questions in the skilled communication decision tree. The first relates to whether the communication is extended or multimodal. The second relates to providing supporting evidence. And the third to designing communication for a particular audience. Considering each of these questions is useful when designing a learning activity. The power of using a decision tree is that it provides a framework for designing learning activities, and in this case, examining opportunities for skilled communication. Not all learning activities will have each of the levels, but over the period of a year, for example, you should look to include learning activities at all of the levels. For example, there will be times when you will need students to engage in extended or multimodal communication. At times, you will want your students to provide supporting evidence to explain their ideas or support their thesis with facts and examples. There are other times when you will want your students to design products to communicate to a particular audience. It all depends on planned learning outcomes and the needs of your students. You need to bear in mind as you look at the decision tree that the numbering system is a code, not a score. For example, a code 1 merely indicates that students are not required to produce extended or multimodal communication. So let's look at this skilled communication tree. The first question asks if the activity requires extended or multimodal communication. If the answer to this question is no, and students are not required to produce extended or multimodal communication, then the learning activity is coded as a 1. This is an example of a classroom activity that can be coded as a 1.
Phonics is part of language, and the question again was, how does language relate to reading? So you need to have a think about that, whoever that group is. Finish off that sentence, please. Reading, it relates to language because punctuation, grammar, proper sentences are all in reading. Very good. Okay, so we have a little bit of punctuation ourselves to take a look at there, whoever that group was. So just have a look. Should there be a full stop there? No. So it relates to language because punctuation, comma, grammar, proper sentences are all in reading. Okay, next one, reading. Language relates to reading because if you have good language, you will be able to understand a lot more. Very good. Therefore, you will find reading more enjoyable and in turn, you will be better at it. Excellent. Language helps our writing as we would have much better vocabulary, so your stories will be better. Okay, very good. So you've gone into writing there, whoever put that in. So maybe just copy and cut that out and put it into a writing section for me instead, and you can finish off the writing then in a second. You can add to that. Okay, we have some little bits here. Do we have anything else? Let's see, I think that's it. Okay, we have one more?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. If there's anybody pressing it at the moment or are inputting, hold off for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, because that's why it's just because we're all doing the same thing. Okay, reading. It helps us to learn more about our vocabulary, helps us to understand the meaning of words, and helps us to evolve our language. Lovely language there ourselves. What does evolve our language mean?
Help us more.
Help us more.
To remember.
Not exactly. What does evolve mean?
It means make it better. Well, get it to another level.
Get it to another level. Very good.
And involving something would be
changing. Very good. So think of evolution. Especially with essays and things like that. Language helps our punctuation and our phonics also. Very good. It is very important for language and punctuation. Writing helps us with our vocabulary and when we speak. So, rather than writing helps us with our vocabulary, when we speak, we learn new
words
or vocabulary, and the vocabulary helps us with our writing. So this one, whoever wrote this, you just need to change it around a little bit because it's your language is developed, your vocabulary is developed when you speak, and that helps your vocabulary. Take two. Your language is helped when you speak, it's developed when you speak, your vocabulary, and then your vocabulary helps your writing. Okay, so it's going the other way. So whoever wrote that sentence, just change it around a little bit. Okay, the next one. When people write an essay, okay, we'll try again. When people write an essay, they have punctuation, grammar, and you use it while you are speaking. Also, watching TV helps your language. Yes, it does. You're developing new language when you're watching TV as well. It's not just from speaking to people, because you're listening to new language. Now, do you get to speak back to the television? No. So, in that terms, yes, you are learning new language, but you're not getting opportunity to express it, to practice it. Okay? Very good. Now, let's see if we have another one down here. So, reading. It relates to language because punctuation, grammar, proper sentences are all in reading. Exactly.
As I said, the first question asks if the activity requires extended or multimodal communication. If the answer to this question is yes, students are required to produce extended communication or multimodal communication, then I must ask if the students are required to provide supporting evidence. If the answer is no, then I must ask if the students communicate to a particular audience. If the answer to this question is also no, the learning activity is coded at a 2. In other words, Students are not required to provide supporting evidence or design their work for a particular audience. This is an example of classroom activity that can be coded as a 2.
Story checkoff. You tap into new story and you write the title, say Ryan's Big Adventure. And then I'm going to go into logo. So this Murray email, we got a picture and we took a picture of it on our surface. So I'm going to tap into it and press open. It's going to come up here, and that's our school logo. And then description is how we type in what's our story about. So
How did you say, or have you?
Okay.
This is an example of classroom activity that can be coded as a 3.
Can you tell me, how much did you know about the subject before we started?
I didn't know anything about Chekhov before we started, so I learned a lot over the last number of weeks.
Very good. And what process did you go through to make the piece that you did?
Well, first we had to think about it, and then we wrote about it, then we typed about it, and we drew about it, and then we recorded it. So it was a fairly long process, but you get quicker at it as you go along.
Very good. And what type of things did you use for this process?
We used the mind map app M8, and we also used Microsoft Word. They were both very handy in making our Chekhov apps.
Very good. And if you were to do the project again, is there anything that you would change about it?
No, I did my best over it, and I might have drawn better, but you can't really change those. You'd be improving as you go along, and the more books you do, the better you get. So.
Very good. And can you tell us a little bit about the project? Why did you do this project?
We did this project because we recently got our new Surface RTs, and Microsoft have asked us to make these new Chekhov apps to help teach other people how to learn languages or read or anything. And it's a very easy app to try and learn, and it's very precise. So that's why we did it.
And can you tell me what benefit is there to having these books now up on the Microsoft Store?
Well, it's not like a book that you'd have in a library where you have to pass it around. Once you have a laptop or Surface RT or something like that, a million people could download it if they wanted to. So that's the best thing about it.
And what does it actually do? What's the benefit of this?
It basically teaches other people how to read and get better pronunciations because they can listen to the recordings.
Very good. So they'd learn different languages, is it? So is there something that we could do here in the classroom in Clontuskert in the future to help people with languages?
Yeah, if we can do them in different languages or check out books, and it'll help them and improve their pronunciation and teach them how to speak different languages.
And what language did you use it in so far?
English and Irish.
Very good. And which was easier?
The English was definitely easier because the Irish you have to translate, but the Irish wasn't too bad in fairness. So
okay. Do you think it helped your Irish?
Yeah, it would improve it. You have to translate what you write in English. It takes more time, and sometimes you have to look it up in the dictionary, but you get there eventually.
Okay, so do you think you'll be able to use this to improve your own Irish eventually?
Yeah.
Fantastic. When let's see, what do you think you learned about yourself during this project?
We went over topics of listening and speaking, and expressive and receptive language. And we learned a lot using that, like what you do when you're listening. We went over all that, and what you do when you're speaking, and the best ways to listen and speak. So they're just one of the few things you learn.
Very good. And did you know about that before?
No.
And how do you think that keys in with what you're actually writing or reading?
It would improve your vocabulary, and therefore your stories would get better, and you become a better listener as well, which is important.
Very good. And who were what audience did you have for these?
Well, we've been writing Chekhov books for younger students in the junior room. So we are yet to show them the books, but we've been each given a book to write for them, and we went in and asked them questions about what they'd like their book to be about. And we took notes in M8 using the M8 app, and we wrote them and published them now. And once everyone's finished, we're going to go in and show them. So then they'll have a book specifically made for them, and we use their own words they're learning in their word box. So they're going over new and difficult words in their word box as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the project and what you did for the project?
Well, for the Chekhov project, we had to draw pictures, and we did a test book for it, and that was fun. And we did it for homework, and it has to be around like 5 pages because it has to be short for a tester. And a lot of us were really enjoying doing that and colouring and fun. And then we went back to school, and then we downloaded the Chekhov author book maker, and then we did it up on Chekhov, and then we published it, and now it's up on the internet, and we're really proud of that.
Very good. Well done. And can you tell me, if you were to do this project again, would you change anything?
Probably a little bit of my spelling, and maybe put a little bit more hard words into it for other children to learn more.
Can you explain about the hard words?
Like some kids are developing their words, and they need to maybe sometimes they can be a small bit and maybe they need a bit encouraging, and maybe they need some hard words to just help them and to understand more, and that can help a lot in their future too.
Very good. Can you tell us when you were learning about language, some of the things that you learned?
Well, I learned about respective language.
So we'll try that again. So you learned about expressive and receptive.
Expressive and receptive language.
Can you explain what expressive language is about?
It's trying to express what you're saying and trying to make sure you say it clearly.
So speaking.
Speaking, yeah.
Very good. And what's receptive language then?
Make sure you listen to people and make eye contact, and that you're not really listening, and that can hurt other people's feelings.
And tell me, how would language use, speaking and listening, help your reading and writing?
Because you're speaking words, and then say if you're doing a story, you're like, I know that word, I know what it means, I'm going to write it down, and it helps you a lot in your story. And sometimes if you're spelling it, look it up in your dictionary too. Dictionaries help.
Very good. And looking at, say, your own book, was there anything that you saw from downloading other people's books that you added or helped you when you were doing your own book?
Maybe the type of idea that they did and their drawings helped me, because they put in details, and that helped a lot. And they did some of the spellings helped too, because sometimes one word you can use any other words to put in a sentence, and that really helps too. So you can say friends, and relatives or cousins, and it kind of helps you to express the words.
Excellent.
In this situation, the answer to the first question is again yes. So the students are required to produce extended communication or multimodal communication. When we move to the next question, which asks about supporting evidence, you can see the answer is no, meaning that students are not required to provide supporting evidence. However, they are required to design their communication for a particular audience. Remember, the students are required to either provide supporting evidence or communicate to a particular audience, but not both. So in this case, the learning activity is again coded at a 3. This is an example of classroom activity that can be coded as a 4.
We went and asked them some questions about, well, we couldn't make it too complicated, but asked them simple questions to try and figure out what they might like in a book.
Okay, so what sort of questions did you ask, Ethan?
I asked what is your favorite genre, and what is your favorite animal, who's your favorite character.
Very good. So that's going to help you to write your story. Okay. What other type of questions did you ask, Ella?
Who's your favorite character and why do you like the character and what's your favorite movie?
Okay.
Finally, if students produce extended or multimodal communication and provide supporting evidence, then I must ask if the students communicate to a particular audience. If the answer is yes, then the learning activity is coded at a 4. In other words, students are required to produce extended communication or multimodal communication, and they are required to provide supporting evidence, and they are required to design their communication for a particular audience. So to recap, when you are designing a learning activity in which you want to focus on developing skilled communication, you need to keep in mind the questions outlined in the decision tree. First, does the activity require extended or multimodal communication? Next, do students provide supporting evidence? And finally, do they communicate to a particular audience? In this way, the decision tree helps you to be more aware of the type and quality of skilled communication skills you need to plan for in your learning activities. This decision tree can also be represented as a rubric. As you can see, each of the numbers 1 to 4 outline the criteria for the condition for that code. For example, to achieve a code 2, students are required to produce extended communication or multimodal communication, but they are not required to provide supporting evidence or to design their work for a particular audience. You can decide which you find easier to use, the decision tree or the rubric, when you are coding learning activities. To really understand how this applies, in the next lesson, we will look at and examine some 21 CLD anchor lessons.